The morning sky over Seoul looked normal until it suddenly turned black. The sun disappeared behind something so massive that people stopped walking and stared up in shock. A ship longer than 10 city blocks floated above the tallest buildings. Its dark metal surface reflected no light and made no sound as it hung in the air like a nightmare made real similar. Ships appeared over every major city on Earth: New York, Tokyo, London, Moscow, Beijing. Each one blocked out the sun and cast shadows that stretched for miles. People ran screaming through the streets, while others stood frozen in terror, wondering if this was the end of everything they had ever known. President Kim stood in the emergency meeting room deep beneath Seoul, watching the news feeds from around the world. His face showed no fear, even though every military advisor around the table looked ready to panic. The alien ships had appeared without warning, and their technology was clearly far beyond anything humans had ever imagined. The first message came exactly 1 hour after the ships arrived. Every television, radio, and computer screen on Earth suddenly displayed the same image. A creature that looked like a giant praying mantis stood in what appeared to be the bridge of a spaceship. Its 4 arms moved as it spoke, and a mechanical voice translated its words into every human language. "I am Admiral Beck of the Corvan Empire," the voice said. "Your species has been located and evaluated. We have conquered over 300 worlds in this galaxy, and your planet will be added to our collection. You have exactly 72 Earth hours to surrender completely. If you refuse, we will demonstrate why resistance is impossible." The alien admiral gestured with one of his arms, and the image changed to show recordings of other worlds, other species that had tried to fight the Corvan Empire. Cities turned to glass in seconds, armies wiped out by weapons that seemed to bend reality itself, entire civilizations reduced to slaves in underground mines. "Your military forces are primitive," the admiral continued. "Your weapons cannot harm our ships. Your technology is thousands of years behind ours, but we are not unreasonable. If you surrender now, your species will be allowed to serve us as workers. Your children will live, though they will never know freedom." President Kim watched the broadcast with growing anger. He had spent his entire life serving his country, and now some alien monster was demanding that humanity bow down and accept slavery. The other world leaders on the video conference screen looked terrified. Some were already talking about surrender terms. The alien admiral was not finished speaking. "If you choose to resist, we will send our shadow guard to your planet. These are not ordinary soldiers. They are the perfect killers, trained from birth for one purpose only: the elimination of resistance. They can become invisible to your eyes, and your machines they can walk through solid walls. They can kill with a single touch of their poisoned claws." The image changed again, showing dark figures moving like ghosts through what looked like a heavily defended military base. Soldiers fired weapons that passed harmlessly through. The attackers' security systems failed to detect them. Commanders died at their desks without ever seeing what killed them. No species in the galaxy has ever successfully defended against the Shadow Guard, the admiral said. 500 of them are already preparing to come to your world. They will hunt down every government official, every military leader, every person who dares to speak against Corvan rule. Your species will beg for the mercy of slavery before they are finished. The broadcast ended, leaving the emergency meeting room in complete silence. President Kim looked around the table at the faces of his advisors. Some were pale with fear, others were already reaching for phones to contact their families. A few looked angry, but they all knew the same terrible truth: humanity had never faced anything like this. "Sir, we have to consider surrender," said General Park, the head of military intelligence. "The footage they showed us, those other worlds, they all had more advanced technology than we do. If they couldn't resist, what chance do we have?" Other voices joined in around the table. "Perhaps we can negotiate terms. Maybe they will be reasonable if we cooperate. Some species might have survived by working with them rather than fighting." President Kim stood up slowly, and the room fell quiet. His weathered face showed the weight of the decision he was about to make, but his voice was steady and strong when he spoke. "We reject their ultimatum. Earth will never surrender, sir." "With respect, General," Park said, "how can you make that choice for the entire human race? We are talking about invisible assassins that can walk through walls, weapons that can destroy planets, technology we cannot even understand." Because President Kim replied, "That is exactly what they expect us to think. They want us to be so afraid that we give up without fighting." They have conquered 300 worlds by making other species believe resistance is impossible. But they have never faced humans before the president. Walked to the window that looked out over the city above. Even through the thick underground walls, they could feel the presence of the alien ship pressing down on them like a weight on the soul. But President Kim seemed to draw strength from knowing. His people were up there, still living their lives, still hoping. There is something they do not know about our species, he said, quietly, something they could not have learned from studying our technology or our military forces. We have traditions that go back thousands of years, ways of fighting that exist outside their understanding of warfare. General Park frowned. Sir, are you talking about martial arts? Ancient combat techniques. Those might work against human opponents, but against aliens with supernatural abilities. President Kim turned back to face the room. I am talking about something more specific than martial arts. In the mountains of our country, there is a temple that most people believe is just a tourist attraction, but the legends say that real warriors still train there, warriors who have spent their entire lives preparing for enemies that normal soldiers cannot fight. The room erupted in arguments. Some called it foolish superstition, others demanded practical military solutions. A few suggested that the president was having a breakdown under the stress, but President Kim raised his hand for silence. I know how it sounds, he said. But right now, legends and ancient stories are the only weapons we have that the aliens do not. Expect we can surrender and hope they treat us well. We can fight with conventional weapons and be destroyed in minutes. Or we can try something they have never encountered before. He picked up a secure communication device and began dialing a number that few people in the government even knew existed. The connection took several minutes to establish, routing through old communication networks that existed in the mountains far from any modern technology. Finally, a voice answered, old and calm. Despite the chaos happening around the world, Master Hoon speaking. Master, this is President Kim of the Republic of Korea. I'm calling because the legends say your order has been preparing for this day for a very long time. There was a long pause before the old man replied, I have been watching the news, President Kim. The shadow guard that the aliens spoke of, they are exactly what my predecessors warned us about. Enemies from beyond our world with abilities that seem supernatural. Can you help us? President Kim asked. Do you really have students who can fight such creatures? Master Hoon was quiet for so long that the president wondered if the connection had been lost. Then the old voice came back stronger than before. I have 2 students who have spent their entire lives learning techniques designed for exactly this kind of enemy. They are ready. How can 2 people fight 500 alien assassins? Because, Master Hoon replied, they are not just people, they are the last inheritors of knowledge that has been passed down through 50 generations of warriors who knew this day would come. The aliens think they understand human capabilities, but they have never encountered the true potential of our species. The alien ships continued to hover over the cities of Earth, casting their dark shadows while countdown timers appeared on every screen showing exactly how much time remained before the shadow guard would be unleashed. 71 hours and 53 minutes in the mountains of Korea. An old man walked slowly toward a simple wooden door. He knocked 3 times and waited for his students to emerge. The 2 young people who answered would either save humanity or die trying, but they represented something the Corvan Empire had never encountered in 300 conquered worlds. They represented the true fighting spirit of the human race. They emerged from his meditation chamber like a shadow that had suddenly decided to take human form. He moved so quietly that even the wooden floors beneath his feet made no sound. Despite being over 200 years old, at 28 he had spent half his life in this temple learning skills that most people thought only existed in movies. His dark eyes held a depth that spoke of years spent mastering techniques that pushed the human body and mind beyond normal limits. Behind him came Mia, moving with the fluid grace of water flowing downhill. She was 25 but carried herself with the confidence of someone much older. Her movements were so precise that she seemed to dance even when simply walking across the room. Where day was stillness and control, Mia was motion and instinct, but both shared the same intense focus that marked true masters of their art. Master Hoon stood waiting for them in the main hall of the temple. His aged face showed the weight of 60 years spent preparing for a day he had hoped would never come. The radio message from President Kim still echoed in the ancient building, and the old master knew that everything he had taught his students was about to be tested in ways that would determine the fate of humanity. Master, the radio mentioned alien assassins. Mia said, her voice carrying just enough doubt to show she was still processing the impossible situation. Surely this must be some kind of mistake, or perhaps a test of our readiness, Master. Who shook his head slowly, his expression grave. I have spent my entire life preparing you both for this moment, though. I prayed it would never arrive. Our ancestors knew that someday enemies would come from the stars. They developed our techniques, not just to fight human warriors, but to combat beings with abilities that seemed to defy the laws of nature itself. He led them deeper into the temple through passages that tourists never saw, toward chambers that had been sealed for decades. The walls were covered with scrolls written in ancient Korean, mixed with symbols that seemed to shift and move in the flickering lamplight. These were not ordinary martial arts manuals, but instructions for fighting supernatural enemies. These are the teachings of the star-shadowed discipline, Master Hoon explained as they entered a hidden room beneath the main temple. For over 1,000 years, our order has preserved knowledge, specifically designed to combat opponents who possess abilities beyond normal human understanding. The breathing techniques that allow you to hold your breath for an hour will protect you from poisonous gases that could kill ordinary people. The meditation practices that make you invisible to electronic sensors will hide you from alien technology that can see through any normal disguise. Day studied one of the ancient scrolls, his eyes widening as he recognized techniques he had practiced for years but never fully understood. Master, these methods, they describe fighting opponents who can become invisible, who can move through solid walls, who can kill with a single touch. How did our ancestors know about such things? Because, Master Hoon replied, they were not just preparing you to fight human enemies. They knew that the greatest threats to our people would come from beings whose abilities seemed magical or supernatural. The pressure point techniques that can stop a human heart will work on any creature that has a nervous system. The movement patterns that let you seem to disappear will function regardless of what kind of eyes are watching. Umiya touched another scroll that showed figures appearing to walk through solid barriers. Master, even if these techniques work as you say, there are 500 alien assassins. How can just 2 people hope to defeat an entire army, no matter how well trained we might be? Master Hoon smiled, and for a moment his weathered face showed the warrior he had been in his younger days. My dear students, the aliens are making the same mistake that every enemy of Korea has made throughout our long history. They believe that superior numbers and advanced technology automatically guarantee victory. They do not understand that sometimes the right 2 people in the right place at the right time can change the course of history itself. He handed each of them a bundle of traditional black clothing, but these were not ordinary ninja outfits. The fabric seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it, and strange symbols were woven into the material with thread that gleamed like captured starlight. These suits had been created by previous generations, using techniques that had been lost to the modern world. These garments will enhance your natural abilities and provide protection against weapons that normal armor cannot stop, Master Hoon explained as his students examined the unusual clothing. The symbols woven into the fabric will help focus your energy, and the material itself will turn aside blades that could cut through steel. As Day and Mia prepared for what might be their final mission, reports continued to flood in from around the world. Government officials were dying under mysterious circumstances. Military commanders were found dead at their desks with no signs of how their killers had entered. Secured buildings, the Shadow Guard, had begun their work, and humanity's leadership was falling one by one. The aliens were moving faster than anyone had expected, striking at targets across multiple continents simultaneously. Their ability to become invisible and move through solid barriers made conventional security measures completely useless. No locked door could stop them, no guard could see them coming, no weapon could harm enemies that existed partially outside normal reality. Where do we begin? Master Day asked as he secured his traditional weapons alongside modern equipment that had been modified using ancient techniques. The katana at his side had been forged using methods that were old when samurai still ruled Japan, but the metal itself contained elements that could cut through materials that did not exist in the normal world. The aliens will target the most important leaders first, Master Hoon replied. President Kim is likely their primary objective since he is the one who refused their surrender demand. You must reach him before they do, but remember that this is not just about protecting one man. It is about proving to the galaxy that humans are far more dangerous than anyone suspects. Mia adjusted the fit of her suit, feeling the way the strange fabric seemed to respond to her movements. Master, what if we fail? What if these ancient techniques are not enough against alien technology that is thousands of years more advanced than anything on Earth? Then we will have died as warriors, should Master Hoon answered, but I do not believe you will fail. The Shadow Guard has conquered 300 worlds by fighting species that relied entirely on technology and conventional warfare. They have never encountered opponents who were trained specifically to counter supernatural abilities. They expect to face primitive humans with crude weapons and simple tactics. Instead, they will discover descendants of warriors who spent centuries preparing for enemies exactly like them. The countdown timer on every screen around the world showed 68 hours remaining. The alien ships continued to hover over major cities like dark omens while they're invisible. Assassins moved through the shadows toward targets who had no idea death was approaching. But in the mountains of Korea, 2 students of an ancient discipline prepared to teach the galaxy that humanity possessed weapons far more dangerous than any technology, weapons that existed not in factories or laboratories, but in the hearts and minds of people who refused to surrender no matter how impossible the odds might seem. The real war was about to begin, and the Shadow Guard was about to learn why Earth had never been conquered. The presidential bunker beneath Seoul was supposed to be the safest place on Earth, 2 miles underground, surrounded by walls of reinforced steel and concrete, protected by the most advanced security systems that human technology could create. None of it mattered to the Shadow Guard assassins who moved through solid matter as easily as walking through air. President Kim sat at his desk reviewing final military preparations when the lights began to flicker. The steady hum of the air conditioning system stuttered and died, leaving an unnatural silence that made everyone in the bunker feel like something terrible was about to happen. General Park immediately activated emergency protocols, sealing blast doors and switching to backup power. System, sir, we are detecting some kind of interference, General Park reported, his voice tight with tension that he was trying to hide. Our instruments are showing readings that should be impossible. It appears that reality itself is being distorted in certain areas of the facility through the ventilation system, invisible to human eyes and undetectable by any earthly sensor. 3 Shadow Guard assassins flowed like living nightmares. Their bodies existed partially in normal space and partially in what they called the death dimension, allowing them to pass through solid barriers while remaining completely hidden from detection. Poison dripped from their razor-sharp claws, and their alien minds focused on a single purpose: killing the human leader who had dared to defy the Corvan Empire 20 floors above ground level. Day and night, Mia approached the bunker entrance disguised as maintenance workers. Their ancient training allowed them to create illusions that fooled both human perception and electronic security systems. The guards saw exactly what the 2 ninjas wanted them to see: ordinary people with proper identification doing routine work that no one would question or remember. But as they descended deeper into the facility, both warriors felt something wrong in the air around them. The shadows moved in patterns that defied natural light. The temperature fluctuated without cause, and their enhanced senses detected the presence of beings that should not exist in normal reality. There are 3 of them moving through the air system, Mia whispered, her training allowing her to perceive distortions that would be invisible to ordinary people. They exist partially outside our world, which is why the security systems cannot detect them. They nodded, his breathing already shifting to the specialized pattern that would protect his body from supernatural toxins. I can sense their location. They will reach the president's level in less than 5 minutes. We need to move faster. The 2 ninjas flowed through the facilities, maintenance passages with inhuman speed and precision. Their movements were so perfectly controlled that security cameras showed nothing but empty corridors when they encountered human guards. Subtle pressure point techniques rendered the soldiers unconscious without causing injury, leaving them to wake up later with no memory of what had happened. In the president's office, the temperature suddenly dropped 20 degrees below normal. Frost began forming On the windows, despite the deep underground location and General Park's breath became visible in the suddenly frigid air, the environmental control systems showed normal readings. But something was clearly affecting the atmosphere in ways that science could not explain. Sir, something is very wrong, General Park said, reaching for his weapon, though he had no idea what he might need to fight. Get everyone out of this level immediately. President Kim stood up from his desk, his survival instincts screaming danger. Even though he could see nothing threatening, evacuate the floor, he ordered, but it was already too late. The first shadow guard assassin materialized in the corner of the room, its form shifting between solid and transparent like a nightmare. Trying to decide whether to become real, its forearms ended in claws that gleamed with deadly poison, and its multifaceted eyes focused on President Kim with the cold hunger of a perfect predator. General Park raised his weapon and fired, but the bullets passed harmlessly through the creature's partially phased body. That was when Day dropped through the ceiling tiles above his. Landing made no sound despite falling 12 feet, but his presence filled the room like the sudden arrival of a thunderstorm. The Shadow Guard assassin spun toward this unexpected threat, confusion evident even in its alien features. How had this human detected its presence? How was he moving with such impossible speed and precision? Day's first strike connected with what appeared to be empty air, but the assassin stumbled backward, dark fluid spraying from a wound that should have been impossible to inflict. The ancient techniques of the Star Shadow discipline had taught him to perceive and attack targets that existed between dimensions, striking at pressure points that functioned across multiple planes of reality. There are 2 more coming, Day said calmly, his voice steady. Despite the supernatural battle unfolding around him, President Kim, you must move to the emergency evacuation point immediately. General Park, your weapons will not work against these creatures, but you can still help protect the evacuation route. The wounded assassin recovered quickly and lunged forward, its poisoned claws seeking Day's throat, but the ninja was no longer standing where he had been. Using techniques passed down through 50 generations, he seemed to step sideways out of normal reality, appearing behind the creature for a strike that sent it crashing into the reinforced wall. Meanwhile, Mia engaged the second assassin in the corridor outside the president's office. Her movements flowed like liquid lightning, every attack connecting seamlessly with the next. The alien warrior had been trained to fight conventional opponents using standard tactics, but nothing in its vast experience had prepared it for someone who could anticipate its moves before it made them. The Shadow Guard tried to use its dimensional phasing ability to escape Mia's attacks, but she struck at points that existed across multiple realities simultaneously. Her blade found targets that should have been unreachable, and her pressure point techniques disrupted the creature's connection to the death dimension, forcing it back into normal space where it became vulnerable. How is this possible? The third assassin hissed in its own language as it materialized to help its companions. These are just primitive humans. They should not possess such abilities. Just humans, Mia replied as she effortlessly dodged its attacks while continuing to pressure the second assassin. You made the same mistake that every conqueror throughout history has made. You assume that technology and supernatural abilities automatically guarantee victory against opponents you consider primitive. The battle expanded throughout the bunker as the 3 assassins called for reinforcements. More Shadow Guard materialized from the death dimension, but they found themselves facing opponents who had been specifically trained to counter their every advantage. Their invisibility was useless against enemies who could track them by the disturbance they created in reality itself. Their poison had no effect on humans whose breathing techniques filtered toxins at a molecular level. Their dimensional phasing became a weakness when faced with attacks that could strike across multiple planes of existence. General Park watched in amazement as 2 ordinary-looking humans systematically defeated enemies that had terrorized entire civilizations. These creatures conquered 300 worlds, he whispered to President Kim. How are Day and Mia able to fight them so easily? Because President Kim replied with growing understanding. They were trained by people who spent 1,000 years preparing for exactly this kind of enemy. The aliens expected to face primitive warriors with crude weapons. Instead, they found descendants of masters who had anticipated their every ability and developed counters For techniques they had never seen by dawn, the presidential bunker was secure. 15 Shadow Guard assassins lay defeated, their bodies slowly dissolving as their connection to the death dimension was permanently severed. Day and Mia stood guard over the evacuation route, showing no signs of fatigue despite the supernatural battle they had just won. This is only the beginning, Day said quietly as he cleaned his traditional weapons. The aliens will be confused now. They will try to understand what happened here, and that confusion will give us the advantage we need. What kind of advantage? Mia asked, already planning their next moves. They will want to study us to figure out how we defeated their most elite warriors, Day explained, but while they are trying to understand our techniques, we will be hunting down the rest of them. The Shadow Guard came to Earth expecting to face a primitive species with crude weapons and simple tactics. They have no idea they are fighting descendants of warriors who turned the art of war into something approaching magic. The real hunt was about to begin. News of the bunker battle spread through both human and alien communication networks faster than anyone had expected. Around the world, the remaining Shadow Guard assassins found themselves experiencing something completely foreign to their nature. Uncertainty and fear. These perfect killers who had conquered entire star systems without a single failure suddenly faced the possibility that they might not be as invincible as they had always believed in. New York City, a team of 5 Shadow Guard assassins prepared to eliminate the Secretary General of the United Nations. Their target was secured in a building that humans considered impenetrable, surrounded by the best guards that Earth could provide and protected by technology that should have detected any intruder long before they could strike. But when the aliens phased through the outer walls, they discovered that their target had mysteriously vanished. Security footage showed nothing unusual, just empty corridors and normal daily activities, but trained eyes would have noticed the brief shadow that moved against the natural flow of light. The reflection in a window that appeared where no person should have been standing, the subtle signs that masters of ancient arts had passed through, leaving no trace except the absence of their intended victim. The lead Shadow Guard assassin gestured to his companions in their silent alien language. Where is the human leader? Our intelligence showed he would be in this location. At this time, their confusion was interrupted when Day materialized behind them like a ghost stepping out of darkness. His first strike severed the lead assassin's connection to the death dimension, forcing the creature fully into normal space. Just as MIA's blade found its heart, the other 4 assassins spun toward their attackers but found themselves facing humans who moved like living impossibilities, defying every law of physics and combat that they understood. You hunt our leaders, Day said calmly as he engaged 2 of the remaining assassins simultaneously, but you forgot the most important lesson of warfare. Know your enemy before you choose to fight them. The battle was swift and decisive. These Shadow Guard had been trained to be predators, not prey. When faced with opponents who turned the hunt around on them, they discovered that all their techniques were designed for attacking rather than defending against beings who could perceive and counter their every supernatural ability. The ancient human arts that Day and Mia had mastered were specifically created to fight enemies exactly like these across the globe. Similar scenes played out with terrifying efficiency in London Shadow Guard teams sent to eliminate the Prime Minister found their target protected by 2 humans who seemed to anticipate their every move in Tokyo. Assassins discovered that their intended victims had been evacuated by people who could see through perfect invisibility in Moscow. Alien killers learned that their dimensional phasing abilities were useless against opponents who could strike across multiple planes of reality simultaneously. Admiral Vec watched his forces diminish with growing panic and confusion. In less than a week, he had lost over 200 of his most elite warriors to just 2 humans. The reports from surviving assassins made no sense at all. Humans who could see through technology that fooled every known species, humans who were immune to toxins that could kill any life form in the galaxy, humans who could fight beings that existed partially outside normal space and time. Send reconnaissance drones, he ordered his increasingly nervous tactical staff. I want complete information about these 2 humans, their capabilities, their origins, their weaknesses, their training, everything. There must be something we can exploit, some vulnerability we can use against them. But the drones found nothing that made sense. Official records showed only Two people who had briefly worked as maintenance staff near the presidential bunker then disappeared completely. No military training in their backgrounds, no special equipment, no technological enhancements. No genetic modifications, just two completely ordinary humans who had somehow defeated hundreds of supernatural assassins. The surviving Shadow Guard began reporting something that had never happened in the long history of their order. They were afraid these perfect killers who had conquered civilizations without experiencing a moment of doubt now found themselves jumping at shadows, constantly looking over their shoulders for enemies they could not detect until it was far too late. In the mountains of Korea, Master Hoon watched the news reports with quiet satisfaction. The old ways are proving their worth, he murmured to himself as he tended the temple gardens. My students are showing the galaxy that humans are far more dangerous than anyone suspected. We may appear primitive to advanced civilizations, but they do not understand that sometimes the oldest methods are the most effective. Meanwhile, Day and Mia had become legends whispered about in the shadows of every major city. They moved through subway tunnels that connected in ways no map showed, traveled through spaces between buildings that existed only for those who knew how to find them, and struck at targets that believed themselves safely hidden in dimensions beyond human perception. The aliens are learning to be cautious, Mia observed as they prepared for their next encounter in Geneva, where the last European cell of Shadow Guard was attempting to regroup. The latest groups we have faced are more defensive, more careful in their approach, Good Day replied, as he checked his weapons and adjusted the symbols woven into his suit. Fear makes them predictable. They came to Earth believing they were apex predators, the ultimate expression of killing efficiency. Now they are discovering what it means to be hunted by humans who have turned warfare into an art form that transcends normal understanding. The Shadow Guard's confidence was completely shattered. These beings who had been the terror of 300 worlds now found themselves afraid of their own shadows, afraid of sounds that might indicate human footsteps, afraid of spaces that might conceal enemies they could not see coming. The psychological advantage had shifted completely, and the hunters had become the hunted. By the end of the second week, fewer than 50 Shadow Guard remained active on Earth. The others had either been systematically eliminated or had retreated to the safety of their ships in orbit, unwilling to face the two humans who had turned their perfect invasion into a nightmare of constant fear and uncertainty. The Corvan Empire had never experienced anything like this in centuries of conquest. Their most elite forces reduced to cowering survivors afraid to continue a mission that should have been completed in hours rather than weeks. The reports they sent back to their homeworlds spoke of humans with impossible abilities, warriors who fought using techniques that seemed to bend the laws of reality itself, but Admiral Vec was not ready to admit defeat. Yet, if precision assassination would not work against these mysterious human warriors, then he would resort to the ultimate solution that no species had ever survived. He would use the planet cracker weapons to destroy every major city on Earth, simultaneously burning away the surface of the world and eliminating the threat. These two humans represented the final phase of the battle was about to begin, and it would determine whether humanity would survive to tell the galaxy that even the most primitive species could possess weapons more powerful than any technology. Admiral Vec stood before the massive holographic display showing Earth floating peacefully in space, completely unaware of the doom that was about to fall upon it. His forearms trembled with rage and humiliation as he reviewed the casualty reports that kept streaming in from the planet's surface. In 3 weeks, two primitive humans had accomplished what entire galactic civilizations had failed to do in centuries. They had defeated the Shadow Guard, the most elite assassins in the known universe. Trained from birth to be perfect killers, had been reduced to fewer than 30 survivors who were too terrified to continue their mission. How was such a thing possible? These were creatures that had personally eliminated the leaders of 300 worlds, beings so deadly that their very existence was enough to make entire species surrender without resistance. Prepare the planet crackers for simultaneous bombardment, he ordered his weapons officer, his voice carrying the cold fury of someone whose reputation had been destroyed by opponents he had dismissed as primitive savages. We will burn every major city on Earth at the same time. If we cannot take this world through precision assassination, then we will destroy it completely and let the galaxy know what happens to species that dare to resist the Corvan Empire there. Massive energy weapon systems throughout the alien fleet began their charging sequence, drawing power from reactors that could fuel entire star systems. The process would take 18 hours to reach full capacity, but once the weapons fired, there would be nothing left of human civilization except radioactive glass and the memory of a species that had been too stubborn to accept the inevitable on Earth. Scientists detected the energy buildup through instruments that were barely capable of measuring such massive power levels. The readings were beyond anything in human experience, indicating destructive potential that could literally crack a planet's crust and boil away its oceans. Government officials around the world received the terrifying news that they had less than a day before complete annihilation. President Kim received the report in his new command center established in a different location. After the bunker battle, how long do we have? He asked, though he already suspected the answer would offer little hope. 18 hours until the alien weapons reach full charge, came the reply. Once they fire, there will be nothing left of any major population center on Earth. The energy levels they are generating could destroy continents deep in the mountains of Korea. Master Hoon felt the change in the world's energy patterns through senses that had been refined by decades of meditation and training. He walked slowly to an ancient chamber that had been sealed for over 1,000 years, placing his weathered hand on symbols carved in stone that was older than recorded human history. The seals dissolved at his touch, revealing scrolls that contained the most dangerous techniques ever developed by human warriors. Forgive me, ancestors, he whispered as he carefully unrolled documents that had been hidden away because they were considered too perilous to use, but our children need the final teaching, and there may never be another chance to pass on this knowledge. Day and Mia received Master Hoon's message through communication methods that existed outside normal networks, channels that connected minds across vast distances. Using techniques that modern science would dismiss as impossible, they were in the ruins of what had been a shadow guard command post in Switzerland, having just eliminated the last alien assassination teams in Europe. Master Hoon is calling us back to the temple, Day said, reading meanings in the message that went far deeper than mere words. The time has come for the final technique. MIA's eyes widened with a mixture of excitement and fear. I thought the shadow walk through stars was just a legend, something the ancient masters invented to inspire future generations. Are you saying it actually exists? Apparently so, Day replied, looking up at the night sky where the alien fleet hung like dark stars waiting to rain destruction upon the world. And apparently this is exactly the situation it was created for. They traveled back to Korea, using methods that took them through spaces that existed between normal reality. Arriving at the temple, as Master Hoon opened the final sealed chamber, the scrolls inside were written in symbols that seemed to move and shift on their own, describing techniques that operated on scales far beyond individual combat. The shadow walk through stars. Master Hoon explained, his voice heavy with the weight of forbidden knowledge that had been kept secret for a millennium. Our ancestors foresaw that someday enemies would come from beyond Earth's sky, threatening our world from distances that no earthly warrior could reach. They developed this technique to allow trained fighters to project their abilities across the vast emptiness of space itself. The technique was incredibly dangerous, requiring practitioners to extend their consciousness beyond their physical bodies to exist simultaneously on Earth and in the void between planets. One mistake in the complex meditation would scatter their minds across the galaxy, leaving their bodies as empty shells, while their spirits wandered lost among the stars forever. Master, the risk involved. Mia began, but Day interrupted her. The risk is acceptable, he said, studying the ancient instructions with the focus of someone whose entire life had been preparation for this moment. If we fail attempting this technique, humanity dies anyway. If we succeed, we will prove to the entire galaxy that human beings are the most dangerous species they have ever encountered. Master Hoon nodded gravely. You understand the true purpose of what we have taught you, he said. All the physical training, all the meditation, all the study of pressure points and energy flow. It was never just about fighting individual enemies. It was about preparing your minds and bodies to attempt something that pushes the very limits of what consciousness can achieve as the Corvan. Weapon systems approached full charge. Day and Mia began the final meditation that would either save their world or destroy their minds in the attempt. Their bodies remained seated in the ancient temple, but their awareness expanded outward, traveling through dimensions that existed in the spaces between normal reality. They felt their consciousness stretch across the impossible distances of space, touching the hulls of alien ships and perceiving the interior layouts of vessels built by technologies that humanity had never imagined. The sensation was like being pulled apart and stretched across the universe. While somehow remaining whole, every instinct screamed at them to retreat back to the safety of their physical forms, but they pressed forward, guided by techniques that had been perfected over centuries of secret practice. Their minds reached across the void and began to perceive the alien fleet not as distant objects, but as targets that could be struck using methods that transcended physical limitations. Admiral Vec was preparing to give the final order to commence bombardment when every system on his flagship began experiencing impossible malfunctions. Lights flickered, computers crashed, navigation systems failed, and the ship's artificial gravity fluctuated wildly. Throughout the fleet, similar chaos erupted as two human minds trained in techniques older than recorded history began systematically dismantling alien technology from the inside. What is happening? Vec demanded. But his crew had no answers to give him. Their instruments detected no enemy ships, no energy weapons, no physical attacks of any kind. Yet their most advanced technology was being destroyed by forces they could not perceive, understand, or defend. Against the final battle had begun, and it would be fought on a scale unlike anything the galaxy had ever witnessed before. In the engine rooms of a dozen massive warships, Day's projected consciousness moved like living shadow given purpose and direction. His understanding of pressure points and energy disruption had been adapted to work on mechanical systems and alien computer networks that operated on principles completely foreign to human science. Every strike he made disabled critical components, turning the fleet's own power systems against them in ways their designers had never imagined possible. The Corvan engineers scrambled desperately to understand what was happening to their ships. Systems that had functioned perfectly for centuries were failing in cascade patterns that made no logical sense. Backup systems, activated only to be immediately corrupted by some invisible force that seemed to understand their technology better than they did themselves. Power conduits exploded, cooling systems overheated, and navigation computers began displaying impossible readings simultaneously. MIA's awareness flowed through the command structures of the alien vessels, like water, finding every crack and weakness in their defenses. Her intuitive understanding of her enemies allowed her to predict and counter their responses before they could organize any kind of effective defense. Where Day was surgical precision, she was controlled chaos, creating system failures that spread through the fleet like a virus designed specifically to target Corvan technology. The planet cracker weapons that had been moments away from firing instead began experiencing catastrophic overloads. Energy that should have been directed toward Earth started feeding back into the ship's own systems. The massive reactors that powered the destructive beams could not handle the reversed energy flow and began shutting down automatically to prevent complete meltdown. Admiral Vec watched his invincible fleet die around him as systems failed faster than his crew could report them. The bridge of his flagship was filled with alarms, warning lights, and the acrid smell of burning electronics. His tactical officers tried desperately to regain control, but every attempt to restore normal function only seemed to make the situation worse. Somehow, how are they doing this? He demanded, grabbing his chief engineer by the shoulders and shaking him. These are humans from a primitive world. They should not even understand the basic principles of our technology. How can they be destroying our ships from a planet's surface? The engineer had no answer because the truth was beyond anything in Corvan experience too. Human minds using techniques that had been developed over 1,000 years of secret training were reaching across space itself to touch systems that existed light years away. Their consciousness operated on levels that transcended physical distance, making the vast emptiness between planets irrelevant to their abilities on Earth. Seismic monitoring stations detected massive explosions in orbit as alien Ships began losing containment on their power systems. The night sky lit up with brief flashes of light as vessels that could destroy worlds were torn apart by their own weapons turning against them. Debris rained down through the atmosphere, burning up like shooting stars that marked the end of the Corvan invasion in the Temple Day, and Mia maintained their impossible meditation while their bodies remained motionless, their breathing so slow and controlled that they seemed to be suspended between life and death. Master Hoon watched over them, knowing that the slightest disturbance could shatter their concentration and scatter their minds across the galaxy forever. The technique they were using pushed human consciousness beyond all known limits. The surviving Shadow Guard assassins felt their connection to the death dimension begin to weaken as the ships that had brought them to Earth exploded one by one. These creatures who existed partially outside normal reality found themselves being pulled back into ordinary space, where they became visible and vulnerable. Human military forces around the world suddenly found themselves able to detect and engage enemies that had been invisible just moments before. Admiral Thek realized that his invasion had failed completely and that staying near Earth would mean the destruction of what little remained of his fleet. With most of his ships either destroyed or crippled, he ordered a retreat to hyperspace, but even that escape was not guaranteed. The same invisible force that had been dismantling his technology was now interfering with his navigation systems as the last functional Corvan vessels limped away from Earth. Admiral Thek sent one final message to the Corvan Empire, a warning that would echo through the galaxy for generations to come. Do not come to this world, he transmitted. The humans are not what they appear to be. They possess abilities that defy all understanding, weapons that exist beyond technology or supernatural power. They are something far more dangerous than we ever imagined possible. The alien fleet disappeared into hyperspace, carrying survivors who would spread the word throughout known space that Earth was protected by warriors whose capabilities transcended normal reality. Species that had been planning their own invasions of the primitive human world quietly canceled those plans and began treating humanity with the respect reserved for the most dangerous civilizations in the galaxy. In the temple, Master Hoon helped Day and Mia slowly return their consciousness to their physical bodies. As the ancient technique reached its completion, both students opened their eyes, looking exhausted but triumphant, having accomplished something that no human beings in history had ever attempted before. Is it finished? Day asked, his voice hoarse from the incredible strain of projecting his mind across interplanetary distances. Master Hoon smiled with pride that went deeper than words. It is finished, he replied, but in another sense it is just beginning. Word of what happened here will spread throughout the galaxy. Other species will come to Earth, some as potential enemies, some as possible allies, all of them curious about the humans who proved that the oldest techniques can be more powerful than the most advanced technology. Mia stood up slowly, testing her connection to her physical form after hours of existing primarily as projected consciousness. Let them come, she said with quiet confidence. We have spent our entire lives preparing for opponents we had never seen, using techniques designed for enemies we had never met. If other species want to test themselves against humanity, they will discover what the Corvan Empire learned today around the world. The few surviving Shadow Guard assassins found themselves completely cut off from their supernatural abilities as their ships fled beyond the range that maintained their connection to the death dimension. Human forces captured them, easily discovering that without their special powers, these feared warriors were just ordinary soldiers with advanced weapons. The invasion was over, but its effects would reshape the balance of power throughout the galaxy. Earth had announced itself as far more than a primitive world ripe for conquest. It had revealed itself as the home of warriors who possessed abilities that seemed to bridge the gap between ancient wisdom and cosmic power. In the days that followed, as debris from the alien fleet continued to fall harmlessly into Earth's oceans, governments around the world tried to understand what had happened. Most of the official reports would never mention two individuals in a mountain temple who had saved civilization using techniques older than recorded history, but in the shadows and quiet places where legends are born, people began to whisper stories of the day when Earth proved that sometimes the most dangerous weapons are not built in factories, or laboratories, but forged in the hearts and minds of those who refused to surrender no matter how impossible the odds might seem. The galaxy had learned that humanity was far more dangerous than anyone had suspected, and that lesson would echo through the stars for generations to come.